Ei, gente, boa tarde, tudo bem? Today we are going to take a look at the preterite, and last semester we just saw an introduction to the imperfect, okay? So we have two past tense, the pretérito perfeito and the pretérito imperfeito. So when are we going to use one or the other, okay? So let me just go over the form, okay, of the past tense. So for the regular verbs, the AR verbs, so the verb falar, por exemplo. Eu falei, você falou, nós falamos, eles falaram. The verbs ending in ER, comer, segunda conjugação. Eu comi, você comeu, nós comemos, eles comeram. And the verbs ending in IR, abrir, for example. Eu abri, você abriu, nós abrimos, eles abriram. Okay, so you're going to use the pretérito perfeito when an action begins and ends in the past. Boom, okay? This is the equivalent to the simple past in English. So when you say, I went to the movies yesterday, eu fui ao cinema ontem, okay? I bought a house last year. Eu comprei uma casa ano passado. We ate broccoli last night. Nós comemos brócoli ontem à noite. Okay? So it's always something that happened in the past. It begins in the past and ends in the past. Boom. Okay? Now let's see the imperfect. So lots of different uses for the imperfect. So let's see the form first. So the AR verbs, what are you going to do? You're going to get the infinitive. For example, comprar. And you are going to remove the mark of the infinitive, the AR, and you are going to add these endings here. Comprava, comprava, comprávamos, compravam. The verb comer, the ER verbs, you're going to remove the ER and add the ending. So comer, comia, comia, comíamos, comiam. And these are the same endings for IR verbs. So it's easier, right, to remember the endings. Now, and the good thing is that there are only 4 irregular verbs in the imperfect. So these are ser, ter, vir e por. So ser, eu era, você era, nós éramos, eles eram. O verbo ter, eu tinha, você tinha, nós tínhamos, eles tinham. Notice the accent mark in the first person plural, the nós form, okay? Vir, vinha, vinha, vinhamos, vinham. Por, punha, punha, punhamos, punham. So here you can already tell that the ones that you really need to know that we use all the time are ser and ter, okay? Now, quando nós usamos o imperfeito? So let's see the situations when you are going to use the imperfect instead of the perfect tense, okay? So let's see. O pretérito imperfeito descreve ações rotineiras ou hábitos no passado. So, the imperfect describe actions that are routine or their habits in the past, okay? So, this is the equivalent in English, usually you say used to, okay? So, look at the examples. Quando eu era criança, eu ia à escola de bicicleta. So, when I was a child, I used to go to school by bicycle. And remember that in Portuguese, you always say by car, by bus, by train, instead of I used to walk, I used to drive, I used to fly, okay? So you always use the preposition de. Quando eu era adolescente, eu não gostava de falar em público. So when I was a teenager, I did not like to speak in public. Quando eu morava com meus pais, eu lavava minha roupa e limpava a casa nos fins de semana. So when I lived with my parents, so you're talking about a habit in the past. You used to live with your parents, okay? So when I lived with my parents, I would, so you can also use would in English, right? You can say used to or would. I would wash my clothes and I would clean the house on the weekends. So there are different ways of saying this in English, right? Meus irmãos e eu assistíamos televisão juntos quando chegávamos da escola. So, my brothers and I watched TV together when we arrived from school. Okay, so we would watch TV together when we got home from school. Okay, so all of these will be in the imperfect because you're talking about routine or habits in the past, okay? The second situation, when you are describing things in the past. So, look at the first example. Fazia frio naquela noite e as ruas da cidade estavam desertas. So, it was cold that night. I forgot to highlight this for you. So, it was cold that night and the streets of the city were deserted. So, fazia frio, you're describing what the weather was like, okay? And you are describing what the streets looked like. So, the streets were deserted, okay? So, fazia frio naquela noite e as ruas da cidade estavam desertas. Os alunos estavam estressados por causa do exame. So, you are describing what the students were like, okay? How they felt. Os alunos estavam estressados por causa do exame. And remember that every time I ask you, why didn't you come to class last week or something, you always say estava doente. So you were describing how you were feeling or what your health condition was in the past, okay? That's why you say eu estava doente. Idade no passado. So whenever you talk about age in the past, you're going to use the imperfect. So, for example, eu tinha 5 anos quando eu aprendi a ler e a escrever. So, I was 5 years old when I learned how to read and write. So, you're talking about age, eu tinha. John Lennon tinha 40 anos quando ele foi assassinado. So, John Lennon was 40 years old when he was killed. Okay? So, here also you have the imperfect. When you tell time in the past, so in the present you say que horas são, and in the past you're going to ask que horas eram. Look at the example. Quando eu cheguei em casa já eram 2 horas. Forgot to highlight that for you again. Quando eu cheguei em casa já eram 2 horas da manhã. So when I got home, it was already 2 in the morning. Okay, so time in the past, always in the imperfect. Then you have intention in the past, and this is the equivalent in English to was going to or were going to. So you had the intention of doing something in the past. So you say, so let's look at the example. But the form in Portuguese will be the verb ir in the imperfect plus the infinitive of the main verb. So the verb ir, and this is what's the imperfect? It's an interesting thing. What's the imperfect of the verb ir? When you remove ir, so you remove everything. So what you will have, and it's an IR verb, so the imperfect of the verb ir is ia, íamos, iam. Okay? So you're going to use ia, íamos, iam, plus the infinitive of the main verb. So look at the example. Meu pai ia me dar carro, mas ele mudou de ideia na última hora. So my father was going to give me a car, but then he changed his mind at the last minute. So your father had the intention of doing something. So this is what it means intenção no passado, okay? He was going to give you a car, but then he changed his idea, okay? So there was the intention or there was the plan to do something. Look at the other example. Eles iam viajar no spring break, mas eles resolveram ficar e estudar para as provas. So they were going to travel during spring break, but they decided to stay and study for the tests. Eu ia telefonar para você ontem à noite, mas depois vi que era muito tarde. So I was going to call you last night, but then I saw that it was too late. So you see here, era muito tarde, you're talking about time in the past, so you use the imperfect again, right? And finally, when you describe an action that was in progress in the past. So in the present, when I ask you, what are you doing now? I'm asking what you're doing in the present moment, okay? So, o que você está fazendo agora? So, eu estou dando aula. Né? I am teaching a class. Now, if you want to ask in the past, what were you doing yesterday at 3 p.m.? So, an action was in progress in the past tense. So, what were you doing? The verb to be in English, what were you doing? She was, blah, blah, blah. You are going to use the imperfect. And it's always going to be the verb estar, never ser, okay? So, look at the example. O que você estava fazendo ontem às 9 da noite? Eu estava estudando. So remember that you're going to use the verb estar in the imperfect, and you are going to use the main verb, the action verb is going to be in the NDO form, the ing form, okay? The present participle. As pessoas estavam dormindo quando o terremoto começou. So people were sleeping when the earthquake began. Minha mãe estava assistindo televisão quando minha tia ligou. So my mother was watching television when my aunt called. So you notice that there is an action going on and then there is one that suddenly interrupts that action, okay? And the one that interrupts is going to be in the simple past, okay? In the pretérito perfeito. So look at the examples again, the second and the third. As pessoas estavam dormindo, so they were sleeping. And then something happened. What happened? The earthquake began. So that one is in the simple past, ok? As pessoas estavam dormindo quando o terremoto começou. Minha mãe estava assistindo televisão quando minha mãe ligou. So my mother was watching television, so this action was happening, boom, and then your aunt called. So this action interrupts that action that was going on, ok? Meus amigos já estavam dormindo quando nós chegamos em casa. So my friends were already. Já means already, ok? Meus amigos já estavam dormindo. They were already sleeping when we got home. Nós já estávamos saindo quando eles chegaram. So we were already leaving when they arrived, ok? So the first... I just went through this for you to remember, for you to review the imperfect, but actually the new uses of the imperfect that we are going to focus on in this lesson are the uses E and D, okay? Intention in the past and an action that is happening, that is in progress in the past, okay? Muito obrigada, gente. Até a próxima.